Hey guys, and welcome to another Factorio Friday Facts number 249, Dead End Exploration, and I am back again with Scarhoof.
Hello, everyone. Recovering from a cold.
Yes, and it's been a tough couple of weeks for you.
Yes. Family reunions, sickness. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
it's a lot, man. I'm glad you're feeling better though.
Yeah, thank you.
Although this may just send you into a spiral again.
Yeah, this is just gonna put me right back in bed.
Yeah, it's not like bad news or anything, but it's like I was telling Scarhoof, I mean, this took me like 25 minutes to read, and I still don't even remember what I read, because this is like really dense. Essentially, this is all about the blueprint library and blueprints, which I was really confused about the title, because I was actually excited. I went in, I'm like, oh, sweet, are they going to like talk about map generation and stuff? But it has nothing to do with that. So, this is all written by Kovacs. While working on the GUI, we reached the infamous blueprint library, and we started talking about how to improve it. This led to discussions about how we can improve the entire system of the blueprints. The problem was not simple at all, and these discussions have been going on for a few days. So, the current version has several problems. That clicking a blueprint in the blueprint library means creating a blueprint almost always. So if you click the blueprint library blueprint to build something and then press the Q key to clear the cursor, it goes into your inventory. This can also lead to random blueprints slowly cluttering your inventory as you use blueprints directly from the blueprint library now and then. Pretty sure we all know about that. As blueprints in the game and in the library are two separate things, the players need to manually check that the blueprint library version is up to date. Once you play more games and use the blueprint library to share blueprints between people, which is the reason for it to exist, it happens that you end up having out-of-dated versions of blueprints in the library as you change them in the previous game, but you forgot to update them in the library. Also, updating the library isn't as easy, because when you update some of your blueprints in the game, you have to like search for the corresponding one in the library, remove it, put the new one in, and such, and that gets really tedious for multiple blueprints. And you can't just like process, as we want people to upgrade their blueprint layouts as they play, not just mindlessly copy paste the first version of the blueprint they figured out over and over.
Yep.
And I think this is
done this numerous times. Yep.
Yeah. This I think is this last sentence I think is really important, because what they're talking about here basically is the infamous base in a book. And I know some people who play with it, and if you like that play style, all power to you. I personally hate this play style, where you make a blueprint, like a set of blueprints, like, sure, you have your rail blueprints, which you'll use all the time, that's fine, but like, where you actually literally just create a base in a book. Like, you have a blueprint from your first smelter all the way to a rocket launch. You have a blueprint walking you through all of that, like multiple blueprints, and then you just use that every game. And I think that's a really, really boring way to play the game. So I'm glad that they feel the same way, that they want you to change, upgrade, or even just make new blueprints as you play. So I'm glad they're trying to encourage this in some way, because, yeah, like the base in a book is just super boring in my opinion. So then another problem, the standard way of putting new blueprints in the blueprint library just puts it at the end of the library, and deleting any blueprints moves everything under it. This means some blueprints are constantly changing position and are hard to find. Once new players open the possibility of making blueprints, it opens many things at the same time for them. Construction bots, blueprints, and their creation, deconstruction planners, blueprint books, and the library. The easier, smaller we can make the step, the better. Other UI annoyances such as exporting and importing blueprints through the obscure drop here to move blueprint box. Yes,
I've always hated that one.
Yeah. So this is changes that will be done no matter what. First of all, the blueprint library and blueprint books will not have this list of blueprints. It will have a grid similar to the one in inventory, so you can arrange blueprints better, which is awesome, because then when you put stuff in, it won't like move them all around, theoretically. There will be a way to do copy paste quickly without having to create a blueprint. This solves one of the biggest sources of inventory cluttering, as you now have to make a blueprint for every copy paste which ends up in the inventory after pressing Q. The most probable idea is that pressing Ctrl C would activate the copy tool. Select what you want, confirm the selection with the blueprint dialog. After that, you Ctrl V and activate last copy, very similar to how computer clipboards work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is fantastic. This
Yep.
would be
Yep. I like
so
it.
nice.
Yep. That way, if you have a one-off thing, you can just go in, find it, copy, paste, done.
Yeah, without having to create a blueprint and then delete the blueprint and such, it's way better. Apart from this, there is a problem of how to resolve.
So how are they going to implement it?
Yeah, and I'm going to try my best to summarize this, but like, I mean, this is just really, really a lot. So the first proposal is no blueprint items, just quick bar references of two kinds. So this would be implemented together with the quick bar is just an action bar idea, which was explained in Friday Facts 191. We're pretty much like, if you have, say, like like inserters on your hotbar, they wouldn't actually be on your hotbar. It would just be like a reference thing, like an action. So when you use it, it would just be pulling it from your main inventory. You wouldn't actually have the inserters on your hotbar, if that makes sense. The idea is that blueprints would never be items. So it's a pretty extreme change, as it would mean no blueprints on belts, no blueprints in chests, etc. In this scenario, we'd still allow mod to create and allow blueprints to be items, but it wouldn't be in vanilla. If you create a blueprint, there would be 3 things you could do with it. Use it or not, and press Q, the blueprint would be destroyed. The reason for this is that we want players to put blueprints explicitly in a slot or in the library instead of cluttering the inventory. Put it into the quick bar, the blueprint or book stays in the quick bar until it is removed or replaced by another blueprint. It is not in the library. Put it into the blueprint library by opening it and explicitly selecting a slot where to put it. And then you can use blueprints directly from the quick bar or from the library. You can also pick a blueprint from the blueprint library and place it in the quick bar. So there would be basically 2 kinds of blueprints in the quick bar. Blueprints that are only in the quick bar, so it stores all blueprint data. Blueprints that are just a reference to the blueprint library. This itself is quite a weird thing to have.
I'm not super happy with this, because now you have blueprints that are in multiple states.
Right.
Some that are actual blueprints and some that aren't. And I personally like storing blueprints in boxes. I have done this where like I know I'm going to build something really big, right? Like a new train station, or I know I'm going to go build an outpost somewhere or something like that. So what I'll do is I'll create a blue chest, a receiving chest. My brain's not thinking right now. Requester chest. Yeah. And I'll program the requester chest with all of the items that I need to stamp down that one blueprint. And then I'll put the blueprint into the chest, and then the robots just over time will fill up that chest with all the stuff I need. So I can just walk by, pick up the whole chest. I have all the items I need to do a stamp down, including the blueprint library, and then I just walk over and do it, and it all just happens.
Right.
So I've always liked that idea.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. So I think I was...
So I say no to proposal 1.
Yeah, and I was reading like the discussions on the Reddit and forums, and someone made a straw poll, and I think proposal 1 was the least liked by far by everyone. So in this proposal, number 2, blueprint items that are linked to the blueprint library. So they exist as regular items, but to solve the problem of having 2 versions of the blueprint in the game, the blueprints in the library and blueprints could be linked. This means that moving a blueprint from the library to your inventory would make the link with the library, making any changes to the blueprint would automatically update the library version. Upon loading any other save that has blueprint linked to the same blueprint, the blueprint in the inventory would also update to the new version.
On paper, I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, on paper for sure.
Yeah.
But as they say here, it has some problems. There are 2 kinds of blueprint items now: blueprints that are only in the inventory and blueprints that are also linked. What happens when you put your linked blueprint into a chest? Is it still linked? What happens when your linked blueprint in a chest is picked up by another player? What if you have 2 identical blueprints in the library that are both linked to each other? Will the player always understand that changing one will change both? And many more. It kind of leads us to not liking this option too much as well.
Yeah.
And then proposal 3, where blueprints only in blueprint library that is also a blueprint bar. There would be a 10 slot blueprint bar under the quick bar or action bar. It would be the only possible storage for blueprints, so no blueprints as items and no separate library. It would have unlimited amounts of pages that can be added, removed, selected. This blueprint bar would be shared between all games. The advantage is the simplicity and straightforwardness, that there's suddenly only one kind of blueprint instead of 3 in Proposal 2. No need to transfer from inventory to blueprint and back. The storage and place where it is used from is the same. The disadvantage is mainly the fact that this isn't integrated with the quick bar or action bar, so you can't use the default 1 through 10 shortcuts to access it. And
that, to me, doesn't bother me too much. I do use the deconstruction planner a lot, though, and I'll usually have it in like slot 1 or 2, so I can just hit number 1 or number 2. So having the deconstruction planner, being able to hotkey is nice. And like if I'm turret creeping, which I know a lot of people don't like, but sometimes you need to turret creep or something like that. Having that, like that, that standard thing where you have like the one big power pole in the center with like 5 laser turrets around it, having that in slot 1 to be able to just like hit number 1 and stamp it down does come in handy.
Oh yeah, definitely. Although I'm not sure this would apply to the deconstruction planner. I mean, maybe
right, but it would apply to the other blueprint if you can't hotkey it. Yeah.
I mean, I thought though, like, I don't know how hard this is programming wise, or if this would be like too much, like too many steps or something. But like, I kind of liked this option, and I figured like, why couldn't you just have like a different type of activation for the hotkey? So like 1 through 5 is your hotbar 1 through 5, and then shift 1 through 5 is the next 5. What if you were to just like have some sort of toggle key, right? Where it was like, I mean, I don't know what it would be, like
shift control 1,
like shift control 1, or like like shift tab 1 or something in that. So then that would toggle your blueprint section. It's a little more tedious hitting the extra keys, but that would allow you to, have that be hotkeyed if you wanted. So I think that, I mean, this one's decent. I think this was like the second highest liked one among the community from what I read. And then we go down to 4. Action bar is persistent in the only storage for blueprints. Again, this goes together with the quick bar is just an action bar idea. Additionally, the action bar will have multiple pages of shortcuts. You can select what page of shortcuts you want to use and which of the 2 displayed bars, something like this. So you'd have these pages here you could choose from, and then you have your current action bar, which would be like your hot bar, and then like the one like below it. Well, I mean, it's pretty much what you have now when you unlock the second toolbar research. So this is similar to Proposal 3, but with the blueprint bar and action bar merged. The action bar with all the pages would be shared between games. Blueprints could only be stored in the action bar. I personally like this the most. Even the description of this is stupid simple. You just open a different save and you are guaranteed to have access to all the blueprints and action bar selections you created in the previous games. You can use keyboard shortcuts to access the blueprints. You can combine pages of action bars of items and blueprints to your liking. For example, action bar with rail building would have with like a rail building blueprint, or rail building would have rails, signal, locomotives, wagons, and different kinds of rail building blueprints or books, which I think is really cool, that concept. The disadvantages of this solution are the limitations. If we keep the amount of action bar pages to 10 for easy access through keyboard shortcuts, it implies a limited amount of space for blueprints. I personally wouldn't see it as a problem, as it is 10 by 10 slot should be enough for everyone, right? You'd be surprised how many blueprints some people have. But seriously, if at least 30 should be free to be used by blueprints, and since we have blueprint books that have unlimited storage size, the amount of blueprints you could store would still be unlimited. Only the amount of books category would be limited. How many people out there would actually have problems with the limitation of having around 30 blueprint books? Obviously, the second solution is to allow more than 10 pages of quick bar, but it would come with different kinds of problems. The second problem that might be the fact that you can't make the blueprint just for this game without putting it into the library. I personally don't see this as a problem, as the whole point of the blueprint library rework is to avoid the problems of merging 2 kinds of storages of blueprints. This would force the players to have only one. The third problem of this might be the fact that the blueprints are not items anymore. Some people might prefer to store their blueprints in chests over the map in a certain way. For example, putting oil setup blueprints in their oil setup map area. This wouldn't be possible anymore, as the blueprints would have to always be in the action bar somewhere. It's a tough problem in cases like this where your feedback is even more valuable than usual. Go ahead.
So I've always had an idea for maybe like a yellow blueprint. And maybe the yellow blueprint might be able to be implemented for this. The yellow blueprint would be something to where you take you create the yellow blueprint, you grab something, and when you stamp it down, it's gone. It just poofs. It's gone. So it's a one-time use kind of a thing. There's a lot of times where I just need to like store, like I need to deconstruct something, but I just want to store that information really quick so I can do something. And then I don't need to create a whole blueprint, and I don't need to have to keep track of the item and all this stuff. I just need it temporarily, you know, so I can do something and then I can stamp it back down, or just maybe all I need to do is I just need to rotate something 90 degrees really quick. And I've always hoped that they could give us a temporary blueprint like that. Well, maybe if they implemented yellow blueprints into the game, those yellow blueprints would be the only physical items, and those would be used in the game. They wouldn't be stored in here. It would be like a one-time use kind of a thing, and then it just poofs when it uses it. Because I do like storing blueprints in chests. But if I had a yellow blueprint, I would have a single copy of that one. I could just make the copy, put it into the chest, and then walk away. And when I need to use it, it's ready to go.
That's a really good
idea. The other thing I don't like about this proposal that they didn't seem to bring up is that the action bar is also 20 slots of inventory space that they would have to give us back in our inventory. So if they just turn it into action bars, then all those are references to other things, which means we just lost out on 20 slots of inventory space.
Right. So they would have to increase the inventory by like 20.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as they increase the inventory by 20, I'm totally fine with that. Honestly, I really like Proposal 4, but I would like some kind of a way to make item blueprints. And maybe it's just a single-use temporary yellow thing that doesn't transfer, doesn't go anywhere else, doesn't sync across game saves might be the way to go. Because I still think that people use temporary blueprints for a lot of little tiny things.
Definitely. I mean...
Yeah.
Although, I mean, isn't that kind of just covered by the copy paste feature they talked about earlier?
Yeah, that's true.
To an extent. I mean, if you're doing it right then,
that's a copy paste of an existing blueprint is what they were using. I'm thinking about a copy paste of think back to like one of your streams a few months ago where you were trying to figure out how to compact something. This is one of the few streams of yours that I actually showed up on. You were trying to figure out how to compact something, right? And when you're sitting there spending an hour or two trying to figure out how to build something as small as compact as possible, you tear it down and you rebuild it over and over and over. Every single time you do that, you take a new snapshot of that item and you stamp it down and have your bots build it. You are now clogging up your inventory, or in this place, your action bar, with a whole bunch of slightly different versions of a single build.
Right.
Having a temporary copy paste, like a temporary blueprint, would allow you to just make minor modifications, copy paste it, make a tweak, then it just goes and you create a new one, copy paste, tweak, and now you're not filling up your inventory or your action bar with a bunch of like little tiny blueprints that just now you have to afterwards go and dispose of them.
Right. That's a really interesting idea. I think that would actually be cool for sure to have like a temporary blueprint, and then that could be like your per game, like in-game one.
It could be a physical item. It could still be the only physical item, and it doesn't transfer anywhere, and it's just a single use.
Right. And that actually brings up a similar issue that I thought of that they don't really they do mention, but I don't think they go into it in depth enough to actually realize the real issue, is like when they say here that, there wouldn't be any like just per game, like per save blueprints, because it would persist through all your saves, right? Well, the problem with this is like that just creates another chore you have to do, because for me, I usually because I mentioned earlier, I don't like the base in a book gameplay. For people like that who don't like that, we create new blueprints every single game. right? Or at least some.
Yep.
And the fact that
you might have your starting certain things here and there, but for the most part, you recreate it.
Yeah, you recreate it. And so the fact that would then always be like stuck in here, that means that every time you start a new game, you're going to have to like do inventory clear, like, clutter clearing and clear out all the ones from your last game that you're never going to use again.
Right.
And that's a pain.
For those of us who run multiple games at the same time, you now have to keep track of all of those.
Yeah, that's even worse when you run like 3 saves at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And another interesting point that Bilka brought up in the Reddit discussion was the other problem with this proposal, and this is actually pretty huge, is with one misclick, a blueprint is gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least now, when you have a blueprint, physical item blueprint you can put in a chest or whatever, you have that, and then you have the blueprint library. But so you have 2 separate sources, right? The problem is in this scenario, if you just misclick, and I did this the other day in a stream, and you delete the blueprint, it's gone. You don't have an item of it. It's literally just gone.
Yep.
And it's like, that can really mess you up.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like it. I think there's definitely issues.
Yeah. Something else I wonder, and I don't know if this is already being done, but is it possible to save blueprints with a scenario? So you would maybe somebody could create a scenario where you start with power armor and a single bot, personal roboport or something like that, and you get a selection of certain blueprints, and you can only use those blueprints to try to get to the end of the game. Doing this might make it so that we couldn't do scenarios like that.
That's very true as well. Yeah, actually. The mod would have, the scenario would somehow disable all your other blueprints.
Right, disable them and then also add in a whole new, an old school blueprint thing, so that the blueprints could be in the,
Yeah, that could definitely be a problem.
Yeah, I in general, I like number 4, but I think they need to have a way of still having some kind of localized blueprints.
Right, and
for either backup reasons or whatever.
And with that, there's a post on the Reddit discussion for this by Magma McFry, who's a very involved member of the community, who has a 5th proposal, which I actually like the most. And so he says, and this is his problem with the persistent hotbars, which is proposal 4, is they break or become useless clutter whenever you change mod loadouts. They cause clutter whenever you switch between saves where you use different sets of blueprints, which is what we just said. Blueprints and hotbars become useless clutter whenever you connect to a server that doesn't allow imported blueprints. When are the blueprints actually loaded to the server? Question on the connect, causing massive lag whenever somebody connects with his big ass library, or on use, requiring a load in time for a thing in your hotbar. So his proposal number 5: blueprints are still items, but everything is better. The player simply has a separate scrollable blueprint inventory where only blueprints go into. In exchange, blueprints cannot go into the player's main inventory. This inventory is visible in a Blueprints inventory tab, like other tabs you plan to add, logistics, crafting, loadout. If you remember, quite a while ago, they talked about that, different things. You can move blueprints to and from the blueprint library, which, by the way, is visible in the same tab above or beneath the blueprint inventory, alongside a blueprint trash slot. Yes, please. A blueprint trash slot would be wonderful, where it just disappears. So with this, players will be able to manage their blueprints with absolutely minimal hassle, being able to select the blueprint from their organizable blueprint library inventory that they want to use in this world, being able to use E and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to select blueprints like they're used to selecting literally everything else, while still being able to use blueprints like items to drop them into chests or other players, and also being able to avoid using the blueprint library completely if they want to. This suggestion would make blueprints in the blueprint library much more streamlined to use, just the way I like to use them, trying hard to avoid status quo bias. You wouldn't actually need to code any super special behavior for the blueprints. This system will also work independently of whether you decide to make the hotbar virtual.
Yeah, so it sounds like basically their idea is to don't really change how blueprints themselves operate, just get rid of the separate blueprints library and integrate it all into your inventory. So it's much easier to move things back and forth between them. That's what it kind of sounds like, or am I?
Well, yeah, I mean, I should have linked you. Pretty much, he's saying pretty much just leave the blueprint library as it is, but then have a separate inventory that you can access specifically for blueprints. Like,
right.
And that's where the physical items are, right? So it's just blueprints remain exactly how they are now, except that they cannot go into your main inventory. They have their own separate inventory. Like that's like just access to like a different tab or something, or a different hotkey.
Yeah.
So, and then no inventory items can go into that. So it's literally just like a second page of your inventory, essentially.
Right.
And I mean, personally, I like that the most because to me, it seems like that kind of solves most of the problems we talked about, and makes it not so it doesn't clutter your main inventory and such.
Right.
I mean, number 4 I think is still decent, but I mean, I actually prefer this suggestion the most personally because I think it kind of just solves most of the problems that Dev mentioned, and also prevents other ones we mentioned. I mean, there's still technically like the 2 states, like the blueprint library and the physical ones, but I think it's really important, as we mentioned, to be able to have blueprints as physical items, whether it be how this person mentioned or how you mentioned with the like one-time use blueprints.
Right. Mostly because of backups, like you said, if they only ever exist in one place and that's in the cloud, you delete that one spot, it's gone.
Yeah, and I mean,
which means they would have to implement some kind of a backup and restore system, and that's, I don't think anybody wants the devs to waste time on that.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Well,
so yeah,
it's an interesting discussion.
Very interesting. Definitely leave your thoughts below. Would really be interested in looking at those. Sorry for the super long thing, guys. Sorry if it was convoluted, but I mean, this Friday Facts is just a ton. But yeah, so there's our thoughts. We want to hear your thoughts, and it'll be interesting to see what the devs decide to do.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to leave it there. You got any last thoughts?
Nope, nothing else.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.